In this video, we're going to be discussing the current state of Prism, as well as touching on the yLuna yield farming event that has begun today. But before we get going, welcome to Crypto Saver. So let's begin by reminding ourselves of my last video which I made. And in that video, I made a claim that I believe that given enough time, the value of pLuna out of the whole yLuna pie will continue to dwindle lower and lower. I even put my money where my mouth is by swapping out of all my pLuna into yLuna. So let's kind of see how that's gone for us since I made that video, I believe, on February 14th. So here's a screenshot from that video that I made. You can see my face from back then on the right-hand side. And we can see the current price of yLuna, of pLuna, of yLuna, and Luna. So what we're going to do right now, we're going to actually add up yLuna and pLuna ourselves. And once we do so, the number that we end up getting is $54.39. Now, the reason why I prefer to actually add those up myself to kind of see what it is out of that yLuna pie is because yLuna can also trade under its own merits since it's also within its own liquidity pool. But anyhow, the total between the two of them is $54.39, which would mean that when I made that video, yLuna accounted for 68.39% of that yLuna pie. Well, how much is it worth today out of the pie? Well, let's look at the current numbers that we have. I'm just going to refresh the page one last time. Just make sure we get some current numbers. We're going to bring up a calculator here. I'm going to show you how I would typically do this. So let's just enter 64.63 plus 11.01. And the number that we see is currently the combination of the both of them is 75.64, right? And let's just take 64.63 and we're going to divide that by the total, which is 75.64, and we can now see that yLuna is 85.4% of that whole pie. So yes, that bet that I made, that thesis that I had in that video is so far panning out beautifully for me, and the decision that I made for swapping out my pLuna for yLuna was the right decision. Now, has anything changed since I made that thesis except for the fact that it kind of started to come true? Well, not really. We still do not see enough utility for pLuna as we know. We can't even, if you hold pLuna right now, you still cannot even vote on governance. Like that part has not even been set up yet. The best thing you can do with your pLuna is simply set up a liquidity pool of pLuna Prism on Prism. That's basically it. While those that hold yLuna are able to collect the typical Luna staking rewards. Now, the big question is, when do I plan to finally start buying pLuna? Well, here's the thing. In my head, I had it that once yLuna is worth about 90% of that yLuna pie, that is when I would start swapping out some yLuna for pLuna. And not because I'm all of a sudden bullish on pLuna, it's simply because at the end of the day, I do want to make sure that I'm holding enough pLuna that if I do want to merge the yLuna and the pLuna, that I can get that yLuna back in place, right? So again, we're not there yet. We're at 85% right now. Once we start getting to the 90% mark, that is when I would start looking towards kind of pulling out some yLuna to pick up some pLuna. Now, obviously, it benefits me for pLuna to be worth as little as possible when doing so, since that would mean that I would have to sell less of my yLuna to accumulate all the pLuna that I would need. If we go to the staking tab right now, and we can actually see what I have staked. I have 239 yLuna staked. That is my currently my staked amount. Now, naturally, if I want to make sure that I'm holding enough pLuna, I would have to make sure I have 239 pLuna, right, to merge back. So again, I'll wait for pLuna to be worth less of that pie, which I think it will because we still haven't seen any new developments of pLuna to give it that much more value. So let's begin by talking about my experience with staking my yLuna. Now, as you can see, I currently have some rewards here, about almost 20 UST worth of rewards. I have withdrawn my rewards, I think twice at least, if not 3 times. And so this is what I like about Prism. The fact that they do take your stable coins that you would typically receive if you're staking Luna, they take those stable coins and they do convert it to Luna. And there's a small nuance here. Once they convert all that to Luna, they do end up converting all that to pLuna and yLuna. But ultimately, since yLuna and pLuna will equal up to Luna, this actually is receiving your staking rewards in Luna. It's just in a more convoluted way. So right now, as it stands, would basically mean that my rewards that are outstanding is 0.23 Luna. It's the easiest way to look at it. Now, what I also like is the fact that I'm given an option to easily convert my rewards to whatever I want. Well, at least to what's being given to me. So in this case, if I want to convert all my rewards, which in this case would be the ANC, airdrop and the pLuna, I can convert all of it to yLuna, and then I can stake that yLuna and compound my returns. But now let's get into the juicy part, the reason why you're watching this video, and that is because you want to know about the Prism farm. You want to know, right? Is the Prism farm a good bet? Should you be transferring your yLuna over to the Prism farm for the next year? Now, it is worth noting, to do so is very simple. You would simply unstake your yLuna from this side, which there's no waiting period, right? It happens instantly. Okay, so once you do unstake your yLuna from that side, you come over to Prism farm and you would simply stake it here. So let's begin with the numbers first. This farming event will last for 1 year. Over the course of 1 year, 130 million Prism tokens will be handed out. Now, naturally, as with all other staking options out there, the more yLuna that is being staked into this Prism farm, the less Prism tokens you will receive, right? So the APR that we're seeing right now at 58%, it is sensitive to two things. Sensitive to how many people are partaking in this, which is by staking their yLuna into the Prism farm. And second of all, it is sensitive to the price of Prism. If the price of Prism goes up, your APR would also increase. And if Prism goes down, naturally, that APR would also be lower. But let's talk about these amps, right? This is something fairly new, got released in the last week and a half or so. A lot of weird literature about it as to people trying to explain how it works. I'm going to try to explain it in the simplest way possible. So to begin, we have to first kind of divide that 130 million Prism tokens that are going to be given out during this event. 104 million of those go into the base pool. Right now, as you can see, it says the base APR is 58%. That's the base pool, okay? Then there's another pool known as amps boosted. In that case, we have 26 million Prism tokens allocated to that pool. In other words, if I'm only going to partake right now in the base APR, which would be if I just came here and I just staked, I would not be grabbing a share of those 130 million Prism tokens. No, that's not the case. I'll be grabbing a share of the 104 million Prism tokens. If I want to grab the remainder, which is 26 million, I would have to have amps to do so. So how do you get amps? To get amps, you first have to own Prism. From there, you would stake your Prism to have X Prism. Once you have that X Prism and you head over to the amps vault, on this page, you're going to see some numbers. So you're going to see something on activated amps. You're going to see amps per day, amps earned, you've been amping for. Again, what does all of this mean? So we're going to break all this down. Let's begin with the amount of pledged X Prism tokens that I have. Okay, we know how we get those. We get those by staking our Prism tokens. Now, why is there X Prism? Well, this is where Prism is kind of smart. Usually in governance, when you stake that governance token, you receive that same token back as a reward. Now, the problem with that method is when people typically receive that token as a reward, they would go and just dump it for something else, essentially creating that downward pressure on that same governance token, right? So Prism is trying to kind of get around that. And what they're doing, instead of handing you Prism tokens as a reward for staking into governance, they're saying, you know what? We're going to have something similar to kind of what Anchor does of UST and AUST. Basically, all the trading fees, all the revenue that's being accrued in Prism, we're simply going to tackle it on top of the secondary token here. And that this token will always trade at a premium to the actual token, Prism being the actual token. Now you can see here on this chart here, the exchange rate. Now the reason why, which is the blue line, the reason why this exchange rate continues to go up is because obviously the protocol's grabbing more and more fees on a daily basis, right? It's an accumulation, in other words. And that is how your Prism tokens are capturing value. Now, the reason why this is smart is because the only way for you to actually realize that value, realize the APRs that Prism is giving you for staking it, is if you unstake your Prism. And in doing so, you got to wait 21 days to do so, right? So, in other words, in other places, other protocols, you could just easily withdraw your rewards in governance and just dump them. Right here, you kind of actually have to wait. Basically have to wait 21 days and so forth. Not to mention that you can't actually just withdraw your rewards and that is it. If you want to withdraw your rewards, you actually also unstaking the foundation of your staking when doing so, right? Because they're connected to one another. So again, it's a clever thing. With that being said, here's an important number to note. Every X Prism that you own will receive 0.5 amps per day. They will continue earning 0.5 amps per day until you have a total of 100 amps. Once a single X Prism has accumulated 100 amps, which, I mean, I guess you can kind of say that should happen over 200 days, just rough math. Once it accumulates 100 amps, it will no longer accumulate any more amps. So when it says right here that I'm currently getting about almost 74 amps per day, you can kind of look at the math here and kind of, it backs out, right? I have 148 here and I almost have 74 here. It obviously backs out to about 0.5. And this would just be how many days I've been accruing these amps for, multiplied against that, right? Amps versus those days gives me 895. And it actually shows me here for 12 days I've been amping for, and it's currently in the unactivated section. So what do you use these amps for? Well, just like in the base pool, I told you that the base pool, the APR in the base pool will be sensitive to how much yLuna is currently staked into it. Because if there's more yLuna staked into it, you are going to be earning less of it. Well, amps is a different pool. So instead of yLuna determining whether or not you're going to receive less and more rewards, in this case, it's how many amps are being staked within the amps boosted pool. Okay? That's the easiest explanation that you could basically look at it. That the more amps you have, and the more amps you end up putting into that amps pool, the more of those total rewards, which is 26 million over the course of 1 year. So let's do this. I have two or three yLunas that are currently unstaked. They're not in the yLuna typical staking. What we're going to do, we're going to click on stake here. And let's put 3 of them in here. Wait for things to load. Let's confirm. And we'll hit on post. Let's go and click on activate the amps boost. And we'll go here and I'm going to click on this button over here and we are going to submit this transaction. Now, while this goes through, there's one thing worth noting. These amps boosts are also going to be used for other things on the protocol moving forward after this yLuna farming event. I think for things such as boosting your governance power, for receiving extra rewards, providing liquidity on Prism. So these things will be coming down the pipeline. So they do plan to keep these amps boosts around. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But okay, we have now activated the amps. So that should actually boost up our overall returns. We go back here. We go to stake, we go to Prism Farm, okay. Okay, so take a look at this right now. The base APR is 58%. Your amps APR is 251%. I mean, I'm even surprised by that. But why is that the case? Why the hell is there such a big difference between my amps APR and my base APR? Answer is simple. The amount of amps I currently have is of a larger size of the whole pie than my yLuna inside the base APR. Now, it does seem over here that I have one more button to click on, so let's click on activate or... Okay, so I see what's happening here, and this is something to keep in mind here. Notice how I'm already accumulating unactivated amps. So if I want to add more amps, and keep in mind, you're earning amps every other second here. You can kind of see it going up. We even went over this. Every single day, I gain 73 more amps. If I want to take the amps that I'm going to gain from today till tomorrow, these 73, I will have to come here and I will have to, again, click on this, pay a transaction fee for doing so, and only then would it be added to this. That's a downside to keep in mind because that's going to be a fee. So depending on how much you have staked, I mean, I just have, what was it, like 2 or 3 Luna, right? That's not much. Now, keep in mind also, my amps APR is likely also extraordinarily high because of the fact that I am also staking very little yLuna. Keep in mind, there's kind of a separation there, right? So because I had a decent amount of amps, since I kind of staked them I kind of staked my Prism from day one, and I started accumulating these amps, and I only have like 2 yLuna on this side. It's not that difficult to create a relatively high return against those 2 yLunas, right? So you might be doing this yourself, and you might be like, wait a minute, I've been staking Prism and everything. I've been amping since the same day that Martin's been amping, and my APR is nowhere there. Well, that's because I'm putting so little yLuna into it. Now, let me show you something interesting here. Notice the back of the govern page, we do not have X Prism, we do not have Prism. They're not there anymore. And that's because now they're connected to the AMPS vault. If we head over to the AMPS vault and we scroll below, we do see our X Prism here. If we wanted to withdraw X Prism out of the AMPS vault and then be able to unbond it for Prism, well, if we do so, guess what? all those amps that you've earned so far for me over the course of 12 days disappear. Even better, if I withdrew one X Prism out of the 147 that I have, just one of them, you see the 896 amps that I have? All of them? Same thing too, okay? So even if you withdraw a dime of that X Prism, you lose all those amps that you accrued over the course of 12 days. Well, for me 12 days. Now, I actually will give Prism, like, some accolades for this, because they figured out a way to make things in such a circular, convoluted way that they really want to persuade you to never withdraw your Prism tokens and to not sell them. Now, I'm not critiquing them for this. I feel like it's pretty clever. It might work out for them. They're really trying to give enough incentives in place to make sure that people do not simply collect these rewards that X Prism is gaining and withdrawing them and selling. They want you to stay locked into governance for perpetuity. But let's get to the big question here. Should you be switching your yLuna from the regular staking over to the Prism farm? Well, let's first begin by looking at the Prism chart here. Now, as you can see, leading up to this Prism event, we did see some new peaks being made. We went just above 56.56. We've come down ever since then. A lot of this could be said, well, we did see the markets come down heavily today, whether it be crypto or the equity markets. Everything's really come down hard. But right now it's at 43.43. And right now the total supply is also 70 million tokens. Just keep that number in mind, 70 million tokens. One more fact to add to this. The Prism that you gain from this farming event that we're talking about is not available to you for 30 days. So the Prism earned today, only in 30 days will it be withdrawable for you if you would like to do so, okay? So I do not expect to see the outstanding tokens that exist right now, just 70 million. I do not expect that number to grow because of that. On top of that, and this is something that Prism, again, deserves an accolade for, all the rewards, all these APYs in the pools that we see here, 15%, 30%, 58%, none of these are coming from emissions. Prism is not handing out Prism tokens as an incentive for providing liquidity. They are not doing so. This is coming strictly from the trading fees. Since they have their own DEX, Prism Swap, which they take 0.30%, 0.20% goes to the actual LP providers, and 0.10% goes to the Prism stakers. So all those APRs that we are looking at are strictly from trading fees. All of these things, great. No emissions, no dilution for the time being. But we do know that in 30 days, dilution is coming. Now, let's do the math here, which I did for us already. 130 million tokens over the course of 12 months. What does that come out to? Well, it comes out to, let's see here, 356,164 tokens per day. How much is that per month? 10,684,922 tokens per month, okay? That means that on a monthly basis, there will be a 15.2% dilution from that $70 million mark, okay? And we expect for this to start hitting about a month from now, since the Prism yield farming began today. So after 30 days, we're going to start seeing some of these tokens being released into the wild at a rate of over 10 million Prism tokens per month. So here's my concern. I believe that once we start seeing these 10 million tokens being given out to people, even though we will say that, listen, Prism has these nice, interesting concepts in place to make sure that people would rather stake their Prism as opposed to selling it, we got to be a bit cynical there and believe that some people will be selling it. Can the market handle 10 million Prism tokens being entered on a monthly basis? Right now, there's zero emissions. Here's the daily chart for Prism. On the very first day, we hit about 45 at its peak. Right now, we're trading at 43. There hasn't been that much upward movement. Even though Luna has gone up since the Prism launch, I believe it has gone up by about $25 to $30. Prism, it's trading fine. Listen, it's trading better than many of the alts out there, but it's not exactly like rocketing up. And we haven't had any dilution, but in a month from now, there is going to be dilution. And as we spoke about, just think about this. Right now, we know, again, from the yLuna farming event, your APR is based on two elements there. How much yLuna is currently being staked there? And what is the price of Prism? If people start collecting those Prisms and they start selling it into the market, the price of Prism goes down, the APRs in that yLuna farming event will go down. At the same time, imagine right now you are a Prism staker, right? And you're receiving a portion of the revenues that the protocol is generating on a daily basis. Well, if Prism is starting to give out these tokens to people for staking their yLuna over there, and let's say these people collect their Prism tokens and then they stake it in Prism, guess what? The rewards you're collecting right now is going to be spread across even more tokens, right? That's exactly what dilution is. Making it less lucrative for people to be staking Prism, which those people might say, listen, the APRs have dropped from, let's say, 20 to 7%. I'm not too happy about that. I want to unstake my Prism, and I would like to sell my Prism. And here's one other point that kind of makes me unsure as to whether or not I personally would like to go into this farming event, and it's this right here, the token distribution. Notice this line here. Vesting tokens for contributors and partners are subject to a smooth linear vesting period between month 6 and month 25. As it is linear, there are no single unlocks, no large single unlocks, and blah, blah, blah. 40% of all the tokens of the total supply will be given out to these contributors and partners. We are talking about 400 million Mars tokens, and they will be given out over the course of 18 months. And do you know how much that comes out to be on a monthly basis? 22,222,222 Prism tokens on a monthly basis, okay? Right now, there are 70 million Prism tokens out, okay? But in what, like 5 months from now, there's going to be over 20 million released on a monthly basis. Now, what I'm about to say has not so much to do with Prism, it has to do so much with just the alts in general, not even on Terra, just anywhere on DeFi. I personally am not a believer in any altcoin, any of these tokens, until we are about halfway through the vesting period for insiders. It doesn't make sense for me to start putting my hard-earned money into these tokens before the insiders had a chance to start selling these tokens themselves, because guess what? They will be selling. Many of these insiders are VCs. They put money into these projects. They put millions into these projects from the get-go, okay? They want to have a return on their investment. They have clients, a fiduciary obligation to them. They want to get a return. They are going to be selling these tokens. Are they going to be selling the 22 million per month? No, okay? I'm not that cynical. They're not going to sell 22 million of it, but they're going to sell a good portion of it. And we know that selling pressure is going to be fierce. So I'm not comfortable buying into that. And they're more likely to be more aggressive with this selling in the earlier portions of their vesting period. After that, they can take a much longer approach in terms of when they want to sell, if they want to stay put, and so forth. Just think about this. There's a reason why professional investors stay away from IPOs. And one of the biggest reasons that they stay away from IPOs is the fact that once a company IPOs, there are usually many lockout periods for insiders. So employees, management, private investors, all of those people that have these shares of these public companies, they are given the opportunity to finally sell to the public in the first year, 2 years. Usually a lot of these lockout periods, and usually for the top C-suite, it usually goes on for longer. But the point is professional investors stay away from IPOs because they know these lockout periods are coming. They know that the insiders want to cash in on all these shares that they've been holding on to. Once all that dumping occurs, that's when they start buying in. And it also shouldn't be a surprise that whenever you hear any sort of headline, it always says that IPOs perform so poorly, right? You can't find a single article out there that will tell you that in TradeFi, you should buy a company out of the IPO. No, they always tell you to wait. And it's never a good deal. And this is one of the biggest reasons. So the same thing applies here. I am not going to be putting my money into a token that has yet to even hit one lockout period. I mean, in this case, the lockout period is apparently happening on a daily basis, which, again, nothing particularly wrong with that. But I'm just saying that once we're halfway through this, now what would halfway through this be? It says right here, this will happen until month 24, okay? If I was really bullish, month 12, right? So 1 year after Prism launched, they launched in February. So maybe in February 2023, I would be looking at Prism once again. That's when I would be looking at it. At that point, I've also given the insiders 6 months to sell. 6 months to sell. I personally do not think I'm going to be missing out on anything by buying into Prism now, okay? Now, sure, if Prism ends up being a rock star, maybe it goes up so much that even when insiders sell, the price is so high up there, it doesn't even matter. But that's a question you have to ask yourself. Will Prism generate so much revenue, so much attention to the point that people will drive up the price of Prism? And that ties back into the fundamental issue that I currently see with Prism, and it is the fact that the actual project itself is struggling a bit. And that comes down to, again, the fact that pLuna doesn't really have much inherent value. Going into the launch of Prism, we kind of had it in mind that you can kind of de-risk or take on risk, right, by switching from yLuna to pLuna and so forth, right? Well, that doesn't really exist right now. The tokens, since they're perpetual tokens, they kind of act completely differently than what was expected with tokens that do mature. And as yLuna starts gaining even more value on pLuna, there will come a point where many people will not see as much of a benefit to refracting their token on Prism. If yLuna ends up being 0.90, 0.95% of cLuna, well, when I say 0.95, I mean 95%, obviously, there's going to be less activity. And that is where I'm struggling with, right? That I would personally rather wait to see version 2 of Prism come out and let them have actual yLuna and pLuna that do mature and that work the way they should, and then it becomes a very interesting project. And that's when I think there will be a lot of demand and revenue coming to the project. But right now, there's an underlying issue with the fundamentals themselves, that people are going to be struggling to find a use case for why they should be refracting their pLuna and yLuna. And because of that, it's very difficult for me to be bullish on the price of Prism for the future. Now, I do believe that Prism is taking the right steps to make sure their token does not dump. So again, I give them a clap for that. But they need to fix the issue of the fact that their revenues might end up just drying up. So to answer the question, would I be switching my yLuna into the Prism Farming event? And the answer for that would be no, for basically what I said. And maybe a year from now, I will look at Prism and I will decide to buy into the token. Obviously, at that point, we'll have so much more data in terms of how much revenue they're finally collecting on a monthly basis. Version 2 should obviously be out. We'll also see what insiders did. We will have access to their wallets. We can kind of see how much trust they have in the future of Prism and so forth. But for me, I'm just going to stay comfortable with the rewards that I'm currently getting from just taking my yLuna. Keeping in mind, again, I would say there's a good chance that by the time you're watching this video, that this base APR that I have in my video is probably higher than the one you have in your video. And it's not because Prism dropped in price. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But just because more people came into the farm, right? So that rate can if Prism stays at 43, I wouldn't be surprised if that base APR ends up coming down to like 20% or so. So yeah, but that's basically my opinion on the matter. Now, if you feel like you learned something in this video, I would appreciate a thumbs up. You can also subscribe for more Terra-related content. I do have a free Discord you can join, by the way. It's in the description below. If you're interested in directly supporting me, I also have a paid membership. You can also see next to the subscribe button. But other than that, thank you so much for watching and have a great day.